Hi, I'm Beverly Harzog, host of Your Personal Economy. You can't control what goes on in the world in terms of inflation or even the price of groceries, but you can control your own personal economy. And I'm going to show you just how to do that because the way you spend your money is the way you're spending your life. And I want you to have the best life possible. In episode 1, I talked about my book, Confessions of a Credit Junkie. And in chapter 1 of my book, I talk about my top 10 credit card mistakes that I made when I got out of college. We covered the first 5 mistakes in episode 1, and now here in episode 2, we are going to cover mistakes number 6 through 10. All right, are you ready? Some of these are pretty wild, but also I think kind of entertaining. All right, mistake number 6, maxing out my credit cards. Okay, I maxed out my credit cards. And if you saw episode 1, you know that I had 7 credit cards. So it was a very serious situation for me. When you max out your credit card, that means you go up to your credit limit and maybe even try to go beyond. Now, the problem with that, well, there are many problems, but one problem with that is that you have a credit utilization ratio. This is the amount of credit you've used compared to the amount you have available. Now, let's say your credit limit is $1,000 and you have a $300 balance. Well, that's fine. That's 30%. If your ratio goes above 30%, it can really lower your score. So you can imagine if your ratio is 100%, it's really, really going to lower your score. So don't let that happen. Now, if it's a situation where you can't pay your bills and you keep using credit cards, you can contact your credit card issuer. They actually have a hardship department. And they will help you if this is a short-term problem, okay? Say you've been unemployed, but now you have a job and you just need 6 months to kind of sort things out and get back on track. But let's say it's a long-term problem. You're just way over your head, and so I want you to contact the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, nfcc.org. I've sent many readers to them over the years, when they have had financial emergencies and needed some help getting out of it. And, there's no shame in reaching out for help. You do not have to go through this alone. Okay. You really don't. So if that's your situation, please reach out. They can help you in a multitude of ways. But if it's a situation where you just haven't been budgeting or tracking spending, do that right now. Budget, track your spending, figure out a strategy for getting out of that debt, because it's compound interest and balances grow quickly. So keep those low utilization ratios on your credit card balances and don't charge more in a month than you can pay off in full by the due date. All right, mistake number 7. All right, back in my days of overspending, I also didn't pay attention to payment due dates. I was just really sloppy with that. I didn't really realize how important that was. You have credit scores, and for purposes of what we're talking about right now, I'm going to focus on FICO scores because that's used most often by lenders. Now, with your credit score, a FICO score in particular, 35% of that score is made up by your payment history. So just by paying your bills on time, not just credit card bills, but all bills, every single bill you have, pay all of them on time, and you are on your way to a good credit score. You know what else happens when you don't pay your bills on time? Other than having your credit get trashed, you can get a late fee, okay? It can end up on your credit report and your score will drop even more, okay? And once negative items end up on your credit report, it's there for 7 years, okay? Now, after the first 2 years, the impact starts to decrease a little bit, but still, it's still going to drag you down a little bit, and you don't want to have to wait that out, okay? So do whatever it takes to set up reminders to pay your bills on time. And if for some reason you can't pay your bill on time, I want you to call the lender and let them know what's going on in your life that's preventing you from paying that bill on time. The worst thing to do is what I did. Just ignore it and hope the problem goes away. It just gets worse. All right. Mistake number 8, ignoring my debt and just hoping, it would magically go away. I'll give you a hint. It does not. When I say I ignored my debt, I really did. I call this head in sand syndrome. Okay. And this is when you can't really deal with your reality or you're not ready to deal with it. So you just pretend it's not there. It's not happening. So I made the dubious decision to stop going to my mailbox. I didn't want to see the credit card bills. I didn't want to see any bills. So I was living in my own little fantasy world for a little while. One day from work, I decided to go home for lunch. I lived in an apartment close by, so at least I saved on gas. And the mailman was there. He was in the mailbox area. And he stopped me and said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you because I can't get any more mail in your mailbox. I thought you'd moved." So I will tell you a secret here. When you're in credit card debt, you turn into an extraordinary liar. I'm not sure, of the science behind that, but for some reason, it just really comes easy because you're living in a fantasy world after all. So quickly I said, "Oh gosh, I lost my mailbox key." And he said, "Oh, well, here's all your mail." So I took it. I went home that night after work. I sat down at my dining room table, started opening all these envelopes. My electricity was about to be turned off. It was crazy. Opened up my credit card statements. I did not look at the entire amount that I owed because honestly, I think I thought I might have a stroke if I saw it. So I just paid minimums or as much as I possibly could just to keep my life going. But yeah, that was a really dark night. When you try to ignore things like this, it only gets worse. It does. And, there's a concept I call staring down your debt. And I wasn't ready to stare down the entire amount I owed that night, but I did eventually. But sometimes you just have to take baby steps and do what you can, start making those payments. And then when you're ready, you can sit down, add it all up and come up, with the best strategy that you can do to get out of your debt. And sometimes that depends on your credit score. So face reality. Sometimes it sucks. Okay. But it's better than letting things get worse and worse. All right. Number 9, keeping my debt a secret. Now, I'm not sure exactly why I thought I had to keep my debt a secret. I do know that I was raised in an environment, where I was taught that if you couldn't manage your money, there was something seriously wrong with you. So a lot of this for me was embarrassment. So I didn't want to tell anyone. And this was a long time ago. So it was really hard to hook up with other people who, were also in debt. Because other people at the time, too, had sort of similar mindsets. And we just thought that was not something that you actually talked about. So if I could do anything different from those days, I would reach out to people, just talk about it. If somebody said, "Hey, you want to go out to dinner tonight?" I'd say, "Well, I got a little bit of credit card debt and I'm just going to keep working on that." And I'll bet if I had said that, I'll bet half the time the person I was talking to would have said, "Oh my goodness, I've got debt too. What are you doing to get rid of it?" I mean, you just never know. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, being in credit card debt is nothing to be ashamed of. This can happen to anybody. If you've learned anything from my story, is that it can happen to anyone. I used to be a CPA. I mean, when I got out of college and got that job, I eventually became a CPA. So I knew corporate finance, but I knew nothing about personal finance. It's completely different. It doesn't matter how much education you've had, where you grew up. None of that matters. I mentioned in episode 1, credit is not intuitive. And it's one of the most difficult parts of learning about personal finance. So, wherever you can get some emotional support, do that. Hopefully there's somebody that you can, confide in to get a little bit of support. If not, be honest about it when you can, about why you can't go on a shopping spree. All right. Are you ready for mistake number 10? Not having any financial goals. Mistake number 10, not having financial goals, may not seem like a big deal, but it actually is. Because when you have goals, short-term, long-term goals, that helps you stick to your budget that you have today. So instead of saying, oh gosh, I'm so stressed, I'm going to the beach, even though I can't afford it, you'll say, oh, well, I've got this goal and I'm going to be able to go to the beach, in a couple of months if I keep saving towards that. So I have something to look forward to. I don't have to go off budget and get in debt today for that. So it really does help you. And, you also want to think about goals in terms of, if you've got children, saving for college education, retirement, investments. There's so many things, that you can plan for. And the earlier you start planning for it, the better off you're going to be later. Trust me on this. So, even if you don't want a traditional retirement, let me tell you what you get to do when you're financially independent. You get to do what I'm doing right now. I'm doing something I've wanted to do for a really long time, and that's start a podcast and help others learn how to manage their money so they can achieve financial independence. So I want this show to help you get there. And, I had many missteps, as you've, seen in episode 1 and episode 2. And here's one more crazy story from my days of spending. I once went on a cruise to Mexico when I had 10 cents in my checking account because I was stressed and I needed to get away. I had no goals, okay? And I guarantee you, when I was in Mazatlan, dancing on a table and Senior Frogs, I was not thinking about my retirement fund, okay? But many years later, I was thinking about it, and I had to play a little catch up because I spent so many years, recklessly spending. So that doesn't have to happen to you. But if you are getting started late, don't let that dissuade you, okay? Start today. Start saving for your future, okay? And you will get there. Thank you so much for joining me today for episode number 2, Confessions of a Credit Junkie, part 2. I share my credit card confessions because I want you to know you're not alone if you've made some of these same mistakes. And I also hope that by sharing the mistakes I've made and how to avoid them, that maybe you don't have to make those mistakes at all. So thanks for joining me. And up next, I have a very exciting guest. We're going to have a candid conversation with best-selling author Liz Weston. You don't want to miss this.